I don't vote. I had nothing to do with it. You might have. I didn't.
Was I like the only one that voted on it?
But you'll be thankful.
All right. Good evening, board members and residents. I'd like to call to order our regular board meeting for Monday, September 8th, 2014. And I'd ask that everyone please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Witt, will you please take the roll call?
Yes, Mr. Batanti.
Here.
Mr. Brado is asked to be excused. Mr. Capral.
Here.
Mr. Tominello is asked to be excused. Mr. York.
Here.
Mr. Witt here. Mr. Verkust.
Here. Thank you. Next on our agenda is the approval of the consent agenda, including approval of the regular board meeting minutes of August 25th, 2014, approval of the bills in the amount of $598,420.57, and approval to enter into a 5-year agreement from October 1st of 2014 through September 30th of 2019 with the Clinton River Watershed Council for stormwater education programming in the amount of $1,800. Is there a discussion, or if not, a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
All right, is there support?
Support.
We've got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Capral to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Next is the approval of the regular agenda. Board members, there are a couple of additions. We received a letter just this afternoon from our engineer, and our engineering services director has asked that we add a discussion about some engineering services for our Coleridge sanitary pump station. I propose that that would be added as item C1. And then Mr. Witt has included an addendum in the packet regarding a Medicare Part D actuarial study we need to have performed. We propose that as item D2. And then lastly, Mr. Huth would like to give the board an update in closed session regarding the Geno's Frank's Holdings versus Harrison Township litigation. So if there's any other amendments, or if not, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the agenda with the amendments.
Mr. Supervisor, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
All right, is there support?
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Batanti with support by Mr. York to approve the agenda with 3 amendments. Is there any discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you, board. Next on the agenda is announcements. A few announcements. The Harrison Township Public Library will be hosting multiple upcoming events. Story Hour will be held this Saturday, September 13th from 11 a.m. To noon. The book this month that will be read is The Bus for Us by Suzanne Bloom. The presentation is free. Registration is required. An informational presentation on ADD, ADHD, and Asperger's will be held on Wednesday, September 17th at 7 p.m. You learn the differences, symptoms, treatment options, and available resources for each condition. The presentation is free. Again, registration is required. Tales with Tales will be held on Saturday, September 20th. Children will have the opportunity to read to a therapy dog. Pre-registration is required, but the presentation is free. Refreshments will be served. There'll be an event on pumpkins held on Wednesday, September 24th at 7 p.m. Learn about the history, the varieties, and how to grow them. For registering at the library events, you can call 586-329-1261. You can also stop in the library and sign up. And remember that for all of the library events, all children must be accompanied by an adult. we're excited to recognize the 5th Annual Boating and Outdoor Festival at Lake St. Clair Metro Park. That's this Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, September 11th through the 14th. You can visit their website, boatingandoutdoorfest.com, all one word, boatingandoutdoorfest.com. Or you can also visit the township website where we have a link to their website to learn more about the event. The Environmental Committee is hosting Boat Town Nautical Coast Cleanup on September 13th and 14th. Help keep our waters clean. For more information, you can learn about it on the township website. The 2nd Annual Harrison Township Economic Development Corporation Golf Outing will be held Monday, September 22nd at Guani Golf Club. The outing starts at noon with a shotgun start. You can contact Bernie Audie at 586-524-2791 or Wayne Babish, 586-206-9182. Or you can also visit the township website to learn more about the event. It's a fundraiser for our EDC. And for all information on these township events, you can call the supervisor's office, 466-1445, or visit our website, harrison-township.org. Any other announcements?
Just a save the date for Parks and Rec. We're gonna have our Hallapalooza, which is a trunk or treat event over at Tucker Park. And we'll have more details forthcoming, but that's gonna be October 25th, and that's a Saturday.
Okay, good. Should be fun. Maybe we can learn about pumpkins September 25th and then go see some on October 25th. Any other announcements? All right. Next on our agenda is item B, a resolution honoring Robert Arrigo.
Sure. At a regular board meeting of the Board of Trustees for the Charter Township of Harrison on Monday, September 8th, 2014, the following resolution was proposed. Whereas Robert Arrigo has given distinguished service to Harrison Township, and whereas Robert Arrigo, during his tenure with the township, served as an employee in the assessing department for a 22-year career, retiring as the assessor, and whereas Robert Arrigo served on the Employee Pension Board for 41 years and spent many of those years as chairman, and whereas Robert Arrigo always sought to advance his skills for the betterment of Harrison Township, regularly attending conferences that would expand his knowledge in the role of Employee Pension Board member, and whereas Robert Arrigo has shown himself to be an excellent representative of the local community through his commitment and service as a member of the Employee Pension Board for the Charter Township of Harrison, and now therefore be it resolved that on behalf of the residents of Harrison Township, the Board of Trustees wishes to thank Mr. Arrigo for his service to the community and to wish him long life and happiness. And I will offer that as a motion.
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. York to pass the resolution honoring Mr. Robert Arrigo.
I just wanted to say, as a member of the pension board, serving with Mr. Arago for the last almost 10 years, it was an honor, serving with them, and he did a good job for the township, and I didn't realize that he had been on that board for 41 years. Long time.
Yeah.
So I hope that Mr. Arago does stop by the office and say hi to us.
Well, he's not only served the township well, but he's also a gentleman and a great resident. And this is just a part of the recognition that he deserves for his service. But
It also should be noted so the citizens understand that the board isn't removing Mr. Arago like other appointments. This appointment was done by an election by the members of the
active members of the
active
pension.
members of the pension who pay into the pension. So there was an election, and there were, I think, 8 people running, and everybody voted. So it's not that we're dismissing Mr. Arago.
Yep. All right. Any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, we have a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. York to honor Mr. Arrigo by passing this resolution. Mr. Witt, will you please take a roll call?
Yes, Mr. Witt, yes. Mr. York,
Yes.
Mr. Batanti?
Yes.
Mr. Brado is excused. Mr. Capral?
Yes.
Mr. Tominello is excused. Mr. Verkest?
Yes.
And I apologize, I got ahead of myself. Talk about that.
No, that's all right.
Related.
Next on the agenda is item C regarding the appointment and reappointment of two members to the Employee Pension Board for a 3-year term to expire September 1st, 2017. Mr. Wood, I know you oversee that election. Perhaps you might want to speak to this item.
Working with the secretary to the Employee Pension Board, Mr. Dimchik, we held an election on August 25th for the Employee Pension Board. The two members were selected were Ms. Debbie Harrison and the reappointment of Ms. Kelly Gemmel. These items come to the board just as an acknowledgement of the results, so that there's a record in the minutes that they were put onto the board. So it's an acceptance of the election results and the appointment and reappointments.
All right, any questions? And if not, is there a motion?
Go ahead and make a motion to accept the results of the election and approve the reappointment of Ms. Kelly Gemmel and the appointment of Ms. Debbie Harrison to serve on the Employee Pension Board, each for a 3-year term to expire September 1st, 2017.
All right, is there support?
Support.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Capra with support by Mr. Batanti to accept the results of the election for the pension board. Any discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board. Next is the addition of item C1 regarding our Coleridge Sanitary Pump Station. Board members, you may recall that back in June, there was an item before this board. There are approximately 8 lots along Coleridge that are ready to be developed. There were some actions in court, and part of those actions came with some sort of a consent agreement from the judge about how things should be handled. There's a need for a 10-inch sanitary sewer line there, but we approved the construction of a 30-inch sanitary sewer line there to replace the existing force main that we have. This will allow bypass pumping in the event that we have a catastrophic failure at the pump station. That engineering was begun, but this letter, as a result of that engineering, Mr. Newmer found that there were some other deficiencies in the pump station and is recommending some additional engineering. Mr. Newmer and Mr. Axtell are here to talk about that.
Give it a shot. Board members, as Mr. Verkest indicated, this additional work that you see before you kind of came out of the work that we've been doing so far. As we're doing, we are eliminating about 500 feet of the force main and replacing it with a gravity sewer. And in most cases, that wouldn't be an issue. It's a good thing because you're reducing the loads on your pumps and making it easier to pump through the shorter force main that you're going to result in. It's kind of a matter-of-fact check that we do. We go back just to check and make sure that the change in pressure head is not going to be a problem for the pumps. Well, what we found was that the pumps that you have in the station right now are not operating within their normal operating parameters. They're at the very low end of the pressure range that they're operating in. And then by further taking out the force main and making it shorter, we're going to be reducing that pressure further to the point where these pumps, if we go ahead with the project and leave the pumps in there, they would cavitate and break, just tear themselves up in a short period of time. We pulled the pump curves for the pumps and looked. These pumps are actually operating, like I said, at the very bottom of the recommended pressure range now. Actually, one of them is below. And the township staff has indicated that in the past they've had problems with cavitation and having to replace components in that pump station. And looking at the design pump curves, I guess we can see why. So we're at a situation now where if we're going to go ahead with the project and eliminate the force main and extend the gravity sewer, the purpose of which is if we have a failure at the pump station, that we can do bypass pumping for a short distance from the station into the adjacent gravity force main or gravity main rather than having to pump at 500 or 600 feet now across 8 driveways in order to keep the station running. This is a very critical station in your system. It serves over 15,000 people. And a failure at this station could cause severe basement backup and flooding in the township if it wasn't addressed in a very quick fashion. So we're here this evening to talk about, we've put together an estimate of what we think needs to be done to the station. The pumps that are in there are on the order of 40 years old. They've been gone through and rebuilt several times. I don't have all the records, the maintenance records in front of me. Those are back at my office. But I do know that they've gone through and been rebuilt and repaired several times in their lifetime. We've also got an issue where a few months ago we did a study when we had potential development coming into the township. And we looked and we noticed that that development couldn't occur because you've got the Prentice pump station, which then feeds into the Coleridge pump station. And both of those stations don't have any additional capacity for future development. So the station is essentially at its capacity right now with the 40-year-old pumps, with the pumps operating in a very inefficient manner as they are. So the options that you have before you are either to leave everything the way that it is now and don't remove the force main and don't shorten up the line as we have already been authorized to do. Or if we're going to take it and replace the pump, the force main with the gravity sewer, we also need to replace the pumps in the station so that they operate within the normal operating parameters for the pumps. And just as an example, I can tell you the existing pumps that you have in there, there are 3 50 horsepower pumps. Those are large pumps. But they're operating very inefficiently because they're operating at the bottom of their range. If we were to replace those, we would probably replace them with 35 horsepower pumps that are operating at the optimal point on their curve. So that's kind of the difference. You can see we've got something big in there that just doesn't work well, and we would be replacing it with something that's sized correctly. And then when I say sized correctly, we would be taking into account the future demands within the township, and we would be building these such that if you did have development within the community, that we could accommodate that through the new pump station. The estimate for the replacement of the pumps, replacement of controls, and then converting the station over to a submersible pump station, which is a more modern style, less maintenance, easier to operate. The estimated cost for that is $250,000. That would be construction cost. That's in addition to the, I think it was $208,000 construction costs that we brought to you in June, July for the 30-inch sanitary sewer that we're designing. If the township wants to go ahead with that, there's some additional engineering that needs to be done in order to select and design the pumps, design the modifications to the pump station, design the control system for the pump station, get those plans modified, get them to the Macomb County and Michigan Department of Environmental Quality for permitting, and get through our process. We apologize, Mr. Axel and I, for bringing you this item at a very late hour, kind of as an emergency item on the agenda. This project is being driven by a development, and the development's essentially ready to go. So they're waiting on us to get our project going and started. Waiting another few weeks in order to get on the next board agenda would put us that much further behind. We're at a point now where we need to get this into the DEQ to get the permits approved and to be able to get the project bid out in time for construction yet this fall. So that's what our goal is. So hopefully I've addressed the questions. The additional cost for the engineering, we're estimating at $10,400. That's about 4% of the estimated construction costs. I will just note that previously, in the first part of the project that we gave you, our fee was about 7.7% of the cost. And the reason that the percentages are different is, in this instance, we've already been authorized to do the bidding and the specifications and a lot of the components of the project that aren't going to change. All we're asking for now is a smaller amount so that we can actually do the design work that's particular just to this piece of the project. And the bidding and the rest of the process that you've already authorized us is already covered on the previous authorization, and we don't need any additional funds for that work. So that's kind of a long explanation of a complex problem, so if there are any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Well, I'd like to add to that a couple of things. This project is a project that is certainly, I guess for lack of a better word, on our wish list for an improvement to our infrastructure. However, if it were not for the potential development that's occurring along Coal Ridge, we might not necessarily tackle this project today. So the scope of work that Mr. Newmer is proposing is work that we know is on our wish list for our sanitary sewer system. When you'd mentioned a figure of just over 200,000, it's important for the board to remember that what we discussed back in June is the force main currently is literally about a 600-foot stretch of pipe that's always basically pressurized or always pushing sanitary sewage from the Coal Ridge station further toward where it connects with the county-wide interceptor or system-wide interceptor. The problem is, if the pump were to fail, there's no way to temporarily pressurize that. By having a gravity-fed sewer main, we can go on one side of the pump station in a manhole and basically drop in a hose or a draw pipe, run it through a temporary pipe that's sitting at grade level, and then dump it into a manhole that's on the other side of the pump station where it can then gravity feed to the rest of the system. So eliminating the force main and replacing it with a gravity main is an improvement, number one. But number two, right now that area, if you're to drive that area and look in that area, right now it's basically an empty field. The estimate was, round numbers, $200,000 to put in the gravity main. Or if we did nothing, the developer has to spend $80,000 just to put in a 10-inch main to service the 8 lots that he has. So we're getting $80,000 toward that $200,000 by doing the work now. But the project is worse than that, because if we were to choose not to do that work now, the cost is going to go up if we wait 5 years to do this work, because now we've got driveways, we've got landscaping, we've got front lawns, never mind the inconvenience to whoever chooses to purchase and live in those 8 home sites in the future. So that gives us the incentive to do the work to this gravity main and replace the force main. That got us to this point. The second thing is the work that he explained in terms of the pumps is one component, and he described that the pumps are 40 years old. It's important also to understand that the servicing of those pumps and the reliability and redundancy of those pumps is, for lack of a better word, 40-year-old technology. These are pumps that we regularly hear about saying, we've got an emergency item, we've pulled pump number 3 from the Coal Ridge station, we took it over to a contractor and they're rebuilding it, and we want you to approve the $3,800 that we know we have to spend to get this pump back in order. The new pumps are more efficient, they're obviously more reliable, it's a newer technology, but they also have a system of installing and removing the pumps that doesn't involve sending a man 40 feet down. Every time we put water and sewer workers in the hole, there's a lot of safety procedures, there's additional risk associated with going down in a confined space. The newer way that these stations are built, they have sort of like a railroad track or a track that runs down. The pumps can be lowered in without putting someone in the hole. They can be serviced a lot more quickly, and we can get this important part of our infrastructure back up to 100% a lot more quickly. So there are involved in the costs for this some redundancy, some potential bypass pumping, and higher levels of safety for the workers. So there's a lot of facets to this project. Is it a project we would eventually be doing? Yes, by mere design. 40-year-old pumps and pump stations are eventually going to need to be replaced. Is it necessary that we do it today? No, but because of the work that's there, we've got $80,000 to fund a portion of this work, and we've got the potential for some restoration if we wait 5 years, never mind inconvenience to the residents who choose to develop and, put driveways all across this work area. So a couple of other components, just points to note for the board.
So what are you looking for tonight, Mr. Axtell?
Actually, we're looking for the approval of the $10,400 for the engineering, knowing that we will be coming forward asking for the additional funds to convert the station.
I make a motion to move forward with the sanitary pump station at Coal Ridge, with the first payment being $10,400 for the engineering services, bringing back the bids at a later date.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. York. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Caprell to authorize Wade Trim an additional amount of $10,400 for engineering for the Coleridge Pump Station. Discussion, board members.
Mr. Chairman, it would seem to me that although we talked about it's not necessary to do this now, we could do it in several years, based on the description we've just heard, 40-year-old pumps frequently in need of repair, and with the examples we've just seen in neighboring communities and the tremendous flooding damage that has been done, this would seem to be, and being mindful of the expenditure, it's a lot of money. But I think that it certainly is, after analysis, money well spent, and money that I would rather see us spend today than in 5 years, when we could potentially avoid some serious damage to our residents' homes.
Sure.
So I think it's a good idea to do it now, rather than something that's going to be done later. Let's get advantage of the added protection at this point.
Gotcha. Excellent. All right.
And just one, and I know I had talked to Mr. Axtell about this earlier, but this, I mean, we have, right now there's concern over additional development on one side of 16 Mile, putting additional strain on the system. Across 16 Mile, there's more vacant land than that if it's a similar development, you know, as a Cross Prentice, where it's multifamily and exceptionally dense. I mean, this system's probably got, you know, the other one's 40-something years old. This one probably will end up lasting that long. I mean, are we planning for the future with this, so we're not 10 years down the road when the market picks up and they're putting something else in and going, well, you can't build because pumps won't handle it.
Yeah, we've done an analysis of all of the vacant property left in the township, and based on your future land use map, what you anticipate that property developing is, we've generated potential future sanitary sewer needs, and then added those into the system so we know what those are, and we're designing the pumps to accommodate that, the existing load plus the future load.
So that won't change the head pressure and all that kind of stuff that we're running into today. And
Correct.
all right.
Changes volume, maybe.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Just one more question. I'm assuming that we're talking about 3 35 horsepower pumps. And is the 35 horsepower etched in stone right now, or is that still subject to some final engineering?
That's subject to final engineering. We contacted some suppliers and did some kind of back of the envelope numbers at this point, just to get a cost estimate put together, so we could bring this to the board. And at this point, we're anticipating they're going to be 35 horsepower pumps. We've still got a little more work to do to get that nailed down.
And is-
But I think you're going to see a significant operational cost savings from operating 35 horsepower pumps versus 50s.
Correct. And is one of the pumps always in standby?
The way that the station operates, yeah, it's got 3 pumps that operate in a
Rotate.
sequence. They operate, right, so the first one comes on, the second one comes on, the third one's in reserve for high water condition. And then when the water comes down, they switch, and 1 goes to 2, 2 goes to 3, and they rotate.
I just have one last question. When we did the workshop about some of our infrastructure needs, you had said that there was a desire to have all of our pump stations be, you know, pretty much the same, so.
Kind of
when you're-
modular.
Yeah, when you're looking at one, we might have, you know, a pump on the rack and we can go and, you know, address the need regardless of the pump station. Does this sort of fit into that overall scheme?
That was one of the things I was going to address the board with, and Mr. Verkest and I met earlier this evening. That is something that can happen with this particular style of pump, is 3 35 horsepower pumps in the well, 1 on the shelf at the shop. If something were to happen, we can simply go out and it's a quick release, pull the pump up, put the new one in, drop it down. We are back in business 100%. That one goes off to be repaired. Now, the thing and eventually you'll hear me come to you in time for Prentice Station and hopefully doing the same thing. But that isn't to say that they will be 35 horsepower pumps so that they will be identical. They could be smaller, they could be larger. Most likely smaller. Coleridge is our largest station. But in the same sense, having an extra pump for each station, we can do that with this particular style as opposed to what we have now, because the ones we have now, even though they're each 50 horsepower, the volutes and the impellers are actually different. So we can't just take and throw another pump in there because the tolerances will not be the same. If the shaft is a little bit longer, the impeller will hit the volute, won't operate. If it's too short, it's going to run and not pump anything, and we're going to have the same issue. So it is a great addition, to the system to be able to have this style pump that's so easy. No more confined space, no more men going down below ground. That will be completely eliminated. The controls will be at ground level where you open up a panel and you're looking at all of the controls. You don't have to climb a ladder 40 foot in the ground, with a gas detector, harnesses on, being tethered. MyOSHA and OSHA safety standards. There are a lot of benefits to doing this, and I understand it's a lot of money and a big cost factor coming forward so quickly, but it is truly the right thing to do.
Yeah, replacing 350 horse pumps would be a lot of money too. So in other words, there's a significant cost in retrofitting that no matter what style we do. But I think the short answer to Mr. Witt's question might be that the method that these pumps will be installed, being that they're a contained pump with quick disconnect fittings and a sliding system, the answer would be that if anywhere else in our system we build a new pump station, and and it requires a 35 horse pump, that pump would be interchangeable. So we're gonna get to that point where we've got 3 pumps there, we've got one on the shelf. When we find that there's a pump that's down, and again, this is serving 15,000 folks. We send a truck out there, we've got a cradle with the pump on it. The hoist pulls out the old one, puts in the new one, hook it up, and we're back at full capacity. And now, as opposed to having an emergency addendum and paying compressed timing to rebuild the pump, we've got the time to be able to go in, have it done at a little cheaper pace. We don't have to literally visit the pump station twice. Cuts down on overtime, cuts down on our repair costs, so forth.
To add to that, we do have another pump station that we're doing now, the Bay Haven Pump Station, sanitary. And we are working with Mr. Axtell to try to standardize on some of our equipment. And I think maybe that gets a little towards your question as well. The pumps aren't necessarily interchangeable because they have to have different capacities and whatnot, but the style of pumps, the controls, and a lot of the other factors that go into it will all be standardized so that you have pumps from the same supplier. It's easier to get parts, it's easier to do them. It'll be a more consistent operation for your field staff, where the controls are the same from station to station to station. That type of thing. We're looking to standardize some of those things for ease of operation.
Okay.
I do have one more question. Are we planning on, I know we've talked about it, I just haven't seen it yet, but the problem there, obviously, on occasion we've had problems with some of the pumps, and I know that's been on our list for 10 years. I think I saw some stuff when I came into office.
Yes.
Even before I came in, like 15 years ago, to do something with that. But are we moving forward with, we have a big problem with electrical there? Are you gonna be bringing that as part of this package where we get
That
a more
was what you
permanent solution there?
You actually approved that last time. With the
Okay.
engineering for the piping, there is going to be a backup natural gas generator.
Okay.
And so that's the beauty of all of this. I mean, it's going to bring things together as one big package. Not to mention, when it goes out to bid now, it will go to, if so approved by the board, it will go to one contractor doing both projects, as opposed to having one project lay the underground piping or infrastructure and then another one coming to build the station. And, God forbid, but if there were an issue, you'd have the contractor saying it's his fault. And, now it's going to be hopefully one contractor, one reliable contractor doing the whole project. And yes, the natural gas generator. So when things go down, the alarm's gonna go off, but the guys, it's gonna get a phone call. As soon as it says power went off, they're gonna get a call back and saying power restored because the natural gas generator just kicked on and took over.
That's what we hope.
And yes, because as you know, you've seen that green box, wheeled box out there numerous times running, 24 hours a day. And
Right.
the guy's out there dumping 60 gallons of diesel in a tank at a time to keep that thing going because let's face it, Coleridge with those big 50 horsepower stations, it runs through the fuel and it puts a lot of strain on the generators.
I guess my thought is, if we're gonna do it, let's just get it all done and be done with the problems that we have there.
And I appreciate your thought process on that because that's exactly what we're
At least
proposing.
for a couple of years anyhow.
And we should be in a much, much better position when we're done.
All right, any other questions? Hearing none, we've got a motion by Mr. York with support by Mr. Caprell to approve an additional lump sum amount of $10,400 to Wade Trim and Associates for additional work to replace the engineering for the pump stations at the Coal Ridge Sanitary Lift Station. Did I ask for public comment? I don't see there's no public comment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board.
Thank you very much, Board.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda, item D1 from the Assessing Department. Board members, at our regular board meeting of August 11 of this year, a motion was approved to interview for temporary employment in the Assessing Department and to bring back before the board recommendations. Interviews were conducted August 29th of 2014. At this time, we have recommendations to hire on a temporary basis 2 individuals to work a combined maximum of 40 hours per week. The first candidate, Heather Yelensich, possesses the MCAT certificate, which is a property appraisal certificate, the basic level, a technician. She has several years' experience as a property appraisal, and she's available because of a commitment in another community. She is available to work up to 2 days per week. Based on her experience, we believe that this falls under the board's policy of having specific skills, which would bring the $15 per hour pay scale with no benefits. The second candidate, Shane Breckling, did not have any particular experience in assessing, but is enrolled in some classes regarding property appraising. And therefore, we would propose that his rate would be $12 per hour with no benefits. Both of the individuals are available immediately. And again, with having 2 individuals to fill that position, I guess you might say it might average out to be somewhere around $13 an hour that we're paying to replace an employee that's out on maternity leave.
One of the things, you might want to 37 and a half hours, that's what we're open per week,
Oh,
just for the record.
yep, that's right, that's true, that's right, if the person, that's a good point, yeah, they're, typically when the temporary employees work, it's 7.5 hours a day, you're right, good point. All right, so as a matter of fact,
Do we know how long this is gonna last, or?
well, I don't know that we've received word from the employee that's on leave, either way. Certainly, there are contractual limitations unless they request additional time, but I have not received any request for any unpaid leave. Any other questions? So then we would propose, as opposed to a maximum 40 hours, we would say 37.5 hours if someone is willing to make a motion.
I'll make a motion to hire Heather Yelenich at a rate of $15 per hour with no benefits, and Shane Breckling at a rate of 12 hours, no benefits, to work a combined maximum of 37.5 hours per week to fill the temporary position in the assessing department.
All right?
I know that, I don't want to use the word assume, because when you use assume sitting at this board, it always is trouble, but.
But we don't have a support.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Yeah. Is there someone willing to support the motion?
Support.
All right, go ahead.
Sorry, Darren.
Oh, that's fine. I would assume that they're not going to be both working at the same time.
No.
Right? That would defeat the purpose
Correct.
of
Right.
right, filling in.
Yep,
Okay,
absolutely.
I just want to make that.
Right. And we're not even necessarily saying that one works 2, one works 3 days. We're gonna kind of see, I mean, these are at-will employees, they interviewed well and came with recommendations, but ultimately we'll learn once we put them to work. But correct, the ultimate goal is to replace one person who's missing, and the young lady, being that she has appraisal experience, should be able to be even greater help in the field for at least 2 days a week.
And obviously we'll do like a drug test,
Yeah.
physical, that standard hire stuff.
Yep, typical pre-employment screening. All right, any other discussion? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, we have a motion from Mr. Batanti, with support from Mr. Caprell, to hire Heather Yellensich at the rate of $15 per hour with no benefits, Shane Breckling at the rate of $12 per hour with no benefits, to work a combined maximum of 37 and a half hours per week to fill the temporary vacancy in the assessing department. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Board. Next item on the agenda is D2 from the clerk's office. Mr. Witt?
Yes, as part of our Medicare program, the program provides a subsidy to employers who cover employees with medical insurance, as long as we continue to cover retirees. As part of the submittal process for that return subsidy to us, we have to have a couple things done by outside firms. One of them is Blue Cross has to do an attestation, and then also our actuary has to conduct a review. The cost is $2,750 for GRS to do this work, but the subsidy we received back is just over $26,000 last year, so it's a well worth it investment to get that money back. So, and I apologize for it being brought as an addendum, but they just got it to us today, and we have a deadline by the end of the month for them to get that work done, so we didn't want to miss a timeline with the federal government.
Make a motion to approve the expenditure of $27.50 for Gabriel Roder service fee to prepare the annual actuarial review for the Medicare D Employer Subsidy Program for 2015.
I got a motion by Mr. York. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Witt. Discussion, board members? Hearing none and seeing no public comment, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, board. Next on our agenda is item E1 from the clerk's office regarding the library. Mr. Witt?
Yes, this item sort of came about as a result of some questions that came up from the past voter-approved millage proposal. And we asked Mr. Huth for some guidance as to how to proceed, what steps the board needs to take moving forward. Based on his recommendation, it is basically that the board must appoint the 6 members of the governing body for the Harrison Township Library until the election in November 2016. This is being brought forward tonight so that the board can have a discussion as to what that appointment process is going to look like, so we can decide that process, advertise that process, and move forward with appointing these members.
I think this might be a discussion where everybody's here. I mean, in all honesty. I know Larry always has input.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't
it was
know.
on the agenda.
I understand.
Well, I think ultimately, if there's a dispute on this, it isn't about the fact that we need to appoint a board. I think everyone recognizes that there needs to be an appointment process. We could not, if there was a dispute on Mr. Huth's opinion, we could not elect somebody in November. We could
Well, I
not
haven't
have.
got there yet.
Right.
So I'm gonna let you talk and then I'll get there.
Okay. My point is, even, it is too late for us to propose that 6 individuals file and run and be elected in November. Now, mind you, Mr. Huth's opinion is that this election should concur with the election of officers for the township, which is what my research indicated as well. But if we couldn't hold an election in November, then the next possible election could be, I don't know, February, it could be some other election, whatever that might be. But we have a need to fill this board either way. And I guess where the discussion is how do we appoint 6 members to the library committee or to this library board? And from our prior experience, when we've had appointments for supervisor or for trustee, we've gone through a process where we advertise the availability of these positions, to the best that we can, kind of give some framework of what might be involved in the positions, accept applications, conduct a workshop where people might express their interest and their willingness to serve or why they believe they'd be a good candidate, and then ultimately the board would have a meeting, whether it be at a regular meeting or a special meeting. I think that was our goal in trying to establish this. Now, if someone says, these appointments should only be for a short period of time, and we should have an election at this date. That's perhaps the discussion that I think you're referring to,
Correct.
that we should have. And my point
Absolutely.
is the item E1 is, how are we going to appoint and advertise for these positions? And I think ultimately what we're looking to do is say, well, there's gonna be some time involved in giving a reasonable amount of time for the residents to apply. They do have to be registered voters, I believe.
Yes, electors of the township.
Correct. So you've got a pool of candidates. We want to make sure they're notified. We want to give them the opportunity to investigate, to inquire, to apply if they're interested, and then review those applications. And then the board ultimately has the authority or the requirement to vote collectively, one at a time, or however they might choose to appoint 6 people. And I think we're just saying we want to begin that process. Now, if it happens to be that you believe that the election should occur in some other fashion, I think it would be incumbent upon you to say, well, the attorney's wrong, or bring some agenda item, or enter into that discussion. But even if that were to bear true and the board were to ultimately say, you know, you're right, Mr. York, Mr. Huth is wrong, and the election should be some other time, we still have to appoint at some point in this process. We have to form and fill that board, at least on a temporary basis. So I think ultimately what we're hoping to do tonight, at least as I understood it, was to say, do we want to accept applications? How long do we want to do it for? Do we want to follow that process of accepting the application, holding a workshop where those folks can voice their opinion, and then ultimately having the board take action to appoint? And the sooner that we begin that process, probably the better for all.
I guess, one question I have, the makeup of this board, are there certain positions? Or is it, they're all equal?
We very parallel to this board.
So
They do
if
not
it's-
run for positions on the board. There's no one that runs
That's the
for
question.
Right.
library supervisor or library clerk.
So all the
It would be more
positions are
parallel to,
level,
right.
And then within the board, they'll select
Who's the chair ultimately. So it'd be very similar to planning commission. We merely appoint 7 members to the planning commission. The planning commission then regularly meets and says, well, you'll be the secretary. Okay, yep, all right. Well, I nominate Joe as the chairman and so forth.
Okay.
It's important to understand that this board doesn't have a set of bylaws, so this board would be saddled with the responsibility of establishing those bylaws. Certainly, there are, I'm sure, many fine examples in neighboring communities of some bylaws for libraries, and there's some rules they have to follow, there's some decisions they'll have to make, but ultimately, this board would have that responsibility. But you wouldn't run for any one position, just one of 6. So do we, is it reasonable that we might try to establish how we'll accept applications and an appointment process? Is that a reasonable thing we might be able to accomplish this evening?
I do have a question.
Yep.
Is it being suggested that we would accept applications for board membership, but are we going to also indicate that membership, that board position, at one point it might be presumed that it could last until
November of 2016. Yep.
But Mr. York's indicating that we might have discussions around the need for an election to be held sooner. So how would we address that in this appointment process? That there might be,
Normally, I would ask our township attorney for some advice.
But we
and at
got
this point, I already got that.
it in writing.
So I don't know what source we'd reach to next, because I know he used MTA as one of his resources, and that might be next on my list. I don't know where the next source would be if you said, you know what, those aren't really credible organizations or a credible individual or
Right.
whatever that case.
And I was merely trying to, because Mr. York had indicated since 2 of our board members aren't here, the discussion as to whether or not this is the attorney's opinion is accurate or not, he had said perhaps we shouldn't talk about that at this meeting, and my point was, we can table this, but really what item E1 is can we begin the process of allowing people to apply for this board so that we might go through that selection process and establish the library board. This board can choose to say, all right, I propose we do it this way and we can vote on it, or the board could say, you know what, I don't want to talk about the whole thing, I want to table it. We can't table it indefinitely. The law is pretty clear that we do have a responsibility to appoint a library board. And I believe Mr. Huth's interpretation is accurate based on the research that I did. But if we're going to enter into a discussion regarding that, and we want to wait till we have a whole board, I was only saying we don't have to wait until we have a whole board to establish this process. I'm ultimately proposing that we follow the same process we have for the last at least 3 vacancies on this Board of Trustees.
Yeah, and even if the authority does lie to be able to do a February election, this body, this library will have taxpayers' dollars in its trust, and so there needs to be individuals who are overseeing it, that have the authority to oversee that money
Prior to February.
prior to that, the earliest election that could occur.
Right.
So, what would we, outside of the other issue, which is a separate argument, we can hash that out at a different time. I think.
Well, I'm gonna speak tonight at some
Oh.
point, I'm just waiting
No,
for
that's fine.
everybody to.
Yep,
Well, I
go
mean-
ahead. But we're all ears, Mr.
Oh, go ahead, Adam.
Well, I was just gonna say, I mean, if we were gonna set up a window for making these appointments to accept applications, what's a reasonable time frame to solicit these? 2 weeks, 3 weeks,
I was thinking up to October 10th,
to October 10th?
which is a Friday. Roughly a month. Just a suggestion.
I was thinking of Friday before, but it's not too far off in my head. So
10:10? Yeah, I'm all for leaving that window open so that folks, ultimately, if it happens to be that someone says, well, I wish I would have known about it, say, well, we accepted applications for a month's time, and talked about it at multiple board meetings, it was on the website, I mean, at some point, it needs to be an open process.
and then the only thing beyond that maybe would be direction to schedule a workshop to interview those individuals after that
After
point.
that.
Right.
Which, the board could, within that motion, give direction to the clerk's office to set a special meeting, or a special workshop, or meeting it would be.
Right.
After that date has closed.
Right, that's what I think, if we were gonna do this, we'd say, we'd advertise and accept applications till October 10. Some period thereafter, establish a workshop where folks could address the board with their reasons why they, ask questions, have a discussion, have an open process. And then sometime after that, have a special meeting where we would specifically make appointments. Point being that in the past, we've filled one opening, so we've had a special meeting where we allowed people to speak, and then we selected one person. That most recently was Mr. Batanti. In this case, because there's a group of folks that are coming forward, 6 people, it might be worthwhile to say we're gonna have a workshop where we are declaring that we're not taking any action, but we'll allow for that interaction, and then perhaps, a week later, roughly, we actually sit down and have a special meeting for the sole purpose of appointing 6 members. So that would be a framework, but Mr. York, you indicated you had something to say.
Sure. Okay, with respect to all that, and I get that we'll follow our process.
Mhm.
Okay. I've always said, going back when supervisor was appointed, when Mr. Forlini left, when Mr. Swikowski left, I've always been of the opinion that the positions are elected. They're not appointed. We can appoint. It doesn't say we have to appoint or we must appoint. We can appoint.
Actually, it says shall appoint.
And well, I'm reading Mr. Hoos.
Well, I'm reading the Library Act.
Well, if we want to get in,
I mean, it says, "The legislative body of a township shall appoint a provisional governing board of 6 members.
Correct.
Who shall hold office until the next township election of a permanent governing board."
correct, but you don't even have the money yet.
But it says
And-
shall.
Well, if you really want to talk about the law, we can talk about the law, Mr. Verkast. The law also says, Mr. Verkast, that if a free public library is established and a governing board elected and qualified, that board, on or before the first Monday of September in each year for a free public library established by a township, and on or before the second Monday in April in each year for a free public library established by an incorporated village, they shall prepare an estimate of the amount of money necessary for the support and maintenance of the library for the ensuing year, not exceeding 2 mils. So reading that and taking a very, very limited scope on this, that would mean that I would not be allowed to collect the money in November for the library because I do not have a governing board.
Right.
Now,
That,
I'm
but
not
that
saying- I'm
section
not saying-
refers
I'm-
to
I'm
an
not-
existing
I'm not-
elected board.
I'm not saying, but I'm reading my attorney's opinion.
Yeah, but he just,
Okay,
he wasn't giving an opinion about that.
I'm-
We're sort of outside of the scope, so I wouldn't want to put words into Rob's mouth.
Right,
That's
it's-
a separate question to ask him if we
Right,
can, if we
right.
want to.
Yeah, Act
Well,
164
I'd like to
begins.
talk,
It
please.
says
Mr.
immediately
Verkes,
after a
Mr.
vote.
Verkes, Mr. Verkes, please. please.
But I mean, you're quoting nonsense.
I'd like to talk. I'm not quoting nonsense.
Okay.
This here, let's read this, okay? It says Kirk, Huth, Lang, and Badalamenti. That's what it says,
Yes, that's what it
right?
says.
And this paragraph, what I just read, is what Mr. Huth used as the law, or is representing as the law. Is that correct?
It's a portion of the act, that's correct.
Okay. So I don't know about all this other stuff. I'm reading what the opinion is based on this verbiage here. And I get that we're going to add all these other items in there, but I'm going by what the opinion says. Period. And I get that there's other parts of that because I read the same thing. Like Mr. Who says, the statute does not indicate the time frame for electing board members to govern this, which in fact is true. And this being such an important issue, I full well believe, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels, I've had some discussion with some people, I don't know how they feel now, but I have had some discussion, and I think that there's enough debate on the election issue or when we're gonna do the election, whether that's 2016, that would be obviously the very outside, per the law that you could do it, would be the next regularly scheduled election, which would be November of 2016. But I think that this topic is so important to this community that I think we need to hold a special election so the citizens can exercise their right, they can do an election, and those people are held accountable to the citizens for the citizens' money that they voted on.
Okay, now may I
And-
ask,
and-
may I
and-
just
and-
ask a
and-
question?
and that's-
Because of that, do you wish that we table this until we have a board of 7 to discuss a special election? I'm just asking, what is your ultimate
You
will?
can run those at the same time, but I think at the next board meeting, when all of the board members are present, I think we need to have that discussion. We can still certainly collect.
That was my question. So you'd
Certainly-
rather we table this?
Well, no, I think what Darren's
If
saying
I
is
could
we could
speak.
do, we can run the appointment process, but we'll have a discussion at a later date about the election.
That's what I'm saying.
All right.
I
That's
fair.
think that that is a fair
Fair
debate
enough. So
that-
My
can we
only
make a
que-
motion on establishing the appointment process?
My
Because
only,
my point is there's no sense in debating it if you wish to have a body of 7 and there's only a body of 5.
I just think it's such an important issue. I think that it's important that everybody weighs in on it.
I understood. So I'm saying, are you saying, do we table this, or is it your will
No,
that
I
we might
think
establish the appointment process this evening?
If I may speak, like I was saying earlier, there's nothing wrong with certainly accepting applications in the interim and posting it that we're possibly gonna be, appointing a 6-member body. I don't know, maybe this board decides that they are just gonna appoint to 2016. I don't know that.
Understood.
All right, maybe they say, we're not gonna appoint anybody and we'll just do a February election. Maybe they say, we'll appoint and do something a year from now. I don't know the answer to those questions. So, that being said, there's nothing wrong with accepting the applications. I don't know how many we're gonna get or things are consistent with how many applications we get for other boards.
All right, so let me
Big
draft a
fund.
possible motion for this
I
evening.
got one if
Oh,
you, I mean,
good.
I'd make a motion to publicly solicit for applications for the library board until October 10th and to direct the clerk to schedule a special meeting to be held after that date to interview and review.
A workshop or meeting?
Meeting in case the board.
Okay,
I don't know if we're gonna do action. I mean, we might have 6
Okay.
people that apply and.
fair enough.
We feel we can make action, so
All
I'd
right,
say,
is that a motion, Mr. Witt?
yes.
All right,
Support.
all right.
So would you agree, Mr. Huth, it says on the second page that there's no cited authority that would require the township to incur the cost for a temporary election to elect board members to serve on the Free Library Board, but there's nothing that says that we couldn't hold a special election either, correct? Because when I read the whole law, I read the same
Is there a
thing.
statute that says you cannot do it? No. And the problem is, when there isn't, we're left to fill in the blanks with what's reasonable, and that's what I did.
Right, but there's nothing that says that we couldn't hold something earlier.
That's correct.
The only thing, I mean, my only concern is, outside of this list, and I guess we can have the conversation later, but when we have the conversation, I mean, we went to the township attorney and asked for some guidance as to how to proceed. He said, based on what he saw in his expert opinion, signed his name to it, probably November 16th. I don't want to just have an argument about it.
No, but we can vote on it.
But I would want to have an answer too.
Right.
Like, if there's some other information that you think's out there, it needs to be at the next meeting. We can't say, well, that's my. I mean, if it's your opinion, that's fine. But if you're saying, well, you know,
Well,
what I
we're
mean,
dealing
I'm
in-
just saying, if there's anything else out there, any other sources of information,
Right, but I
I think
think,
the whole thing is just opinion and.
absolutely.
you know,
Sure.
And so what we're saying is we're gonna talk about the appointment process and how we might select. That's what we've proposed today. I believe it would be appropriate that if there's a board member that disagrees with the attorney's opinion and wishes us to proceed in some other way, that they might bring something before the Board of Trustees to say, I propose a special election. And that's well
Well,
within the right of all
then
7
I
board members.
certainly will put that on the next agenda
Well,
for
that's what I mean,
discussion.
right, but I think that's the appropriate process. If someone said we should rush out and give $1 million to the library, this board member, every board member can say, I propose, or I make a motion to do this, or introduce an agenda item. So we've got a proposal here, or an agenda item, to talk about the appointment process. Mr. Witt kind of gave some framework. We had that seconded. So at some point, we'll vote on that. But I think if we want to have a special election, then I think it's appropriate for a board member to bring forward some proposal on the agenda to say we should do it in some other fashion.
This is, when it says update on Harrison Township Public Library, I think that encompasses that discussion of possibly doing a special election. I don't think that.
And we can do that now.
I don't think that anybody's precluded from bringing that up during this. It doesn't say.
I didn't suggest that,
You
but
know,
you
you
indicated that
just
you wanted a
did.
full board. No, what I said is you just said you wanted a full board to discuss that.
Okay.
Did you not say you said we should discuss this?
I did, but
Well, okay, so I said if you want to bring it back at another meeting, you have every right to put anything on the agenda. That's all I was saying. I'd asked you earlier, do you wish that we table this, or do you wish that we approve the appointment process? You said the appointment process was good. So addressing your prior concern as the chair, all I said was, if you believe that we should have a discussion regarding an election, I think it's appropriate that you put that on the agenda, and we can discuss that at a future meeting.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
In light of the current
Yeah.
discussion, if we had a motion tonight to proceed with the appointment advertisement,
Mhm.
right? And in our next meeting, 2 weeks from now, there was a motion made relative to an election,
Mm-hmm.
there would be certainly no conflict if the board decided at that point in time that election was an appropriate course of
Correct.
action. There's nothing that, we haven't gone down a path that we can't
Correct.
reverse ourselves from.
That-
So,
right.
with all
Right.
respect to what you've said, Mr. York, it would seem to me that we could
Right.
make a motion tonight to post the appointments and continue with this discussion at our
Absolutely.
next meeting when there's conceivably all 7 members.
I was taking exception
Right,
to the
and
fact that Ken was saying that the topic of the election shouldn't be part of this discussion.
No,
That-
I
I'm not
was
debating it
comfortable with
anymore.
it.
I'm
You
not
were the one who
debating
said
it.
you
I'm
didn't
not
wish to
debating
do
it
it because we're
I'm not
short two
debating it
members.
anymore.
Okay. Well, we've got a motion. Is there further discussion? I think we've had quite a bit.
Ay, 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 ay.
Hearing none, we'll open the floor for public comment.
Bill Servia, resident. The voters have spoke, and the millage passed overwhelmingly. Although I voted no, I will admit that. I wasn't in favor of it because I didn't want to pay the money, because I don't use the library. That said, I believe that the reason why the library committee that exists right now that you people appointed, the purpose in doing that was threefold. They want to be part of this library district, which, once they got this millage, they can do that now. They wanted to be full-time, what they call full-time, instead of 22 hours, 40 hours. Once they have the money, they can hire people. The only thing that I see stopping anything is the fact that the law states that they want elected people running the show. So a solution would be simple. Schedule a special election as early as you can, and in the interim, leave the board that's there. Once the money is there the first of the year, they will be able to hire, but they have to come to you people because they're still operating under the old system. The only reason they've come to you in the past with their budget, but they didn't have much money to be able to hire anyone. They will have this millage available, so therefore they can hire people. Then, when you have the electors, they'll be responsible. That's the intent of the law, and I believe everybody wants to follow the intent and the spirit of the law. Nobody's trying to shut the library down at this point in time. Mr. York's opinion is that we're just not following the spirit of the law, even though it says you can appoint. But if you read it, it says if a public library has been established, but you already had a free public library. So it was already established, you already have a board. They can serve the same capacity. The only difference is they won't be semi-autonomous like the elected officials will. So that would be your solution that would satisfy everyone. I agree with Mr. York. I agreed with him when I sat up here and listened for 3 hours for 12 people that spoke for the seat that you now occupy, when it was a foregone conclusion that you were going to get appointed. We all know that. It was a waste of everyone's time. But, you know, it is what it is. Elected, let the people speak. It's always better. You're doing that on your road millage. You're letting the people speak. You could try to do this without them, but you did the right thing and you're going for a November vote for the road millage, correct? Do the same thing with this. You can have an election probably in February. That'll give them 2 months that they'll be able to operate under your guidance. And then after that, when people get elected, they can take office as soon as election's certified. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ed Mancini, 38154 Willamere, Harrison Township. A couple of weeks ago, I addressed Andrew, the deputy supervisor, about my plight. I mean,
Excuse me, sir?
the,
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Specifically, the comments that we accept for public comments would be specific to this issue of appointing a library board.
Oh.
Later in the meeting, we'll open up for any general comment. I'm sorry.
well, as far as I'm concerned, this community is too small to support a library. You got a library just down the street here on Cass Avenue over there, and that's huge. I mean, there ain't, and the younger generation don't go to the library. I mean, Jesus, Pete, I mean, it's unreal. I mean, it's about time you start shrinking these situations where you got things that you're duplicating all over the state, and to have a library in this small community, I bet there ain't a half a dozen people going to it. I mean, and just maybe some older people, but the younger generation puts it all on their computer. So why waste the money? I mean, you know, that's what they look for. As far as I'm concerned, the library should be not allowed.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. If there is no further board comment, we have a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Caprow to solicit applications until October 10th for library board positions and direct the clerk to schedule a special meeting for the interview and possible appointment of the library board.
So that's approximately 5 weeks according to the calendar.
Well, the 8th to the 10th. What is that?
Yeah, but
It's
Friday.
four plus
Yeah,
a half
yeah,
week or
right.
whatever,
It's like
basically.
1.5 weeks. So.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Okay, next on our agenda is item F1, board members. This is regarding the code enforcement building inspector position in the building department. Board members, on June 9th of this year, the Board of Trustees approved to post, advertise, and interview for the code enforcement building inspector position in the building department. The 3 full-time officials, actually it was 2 full-time officials and the engineering services director and the building official, conducted interviews, and we narrowed our choices down to a particular candidate, Mr. Brett Condon. He interviewed well. He currently does not possess the building inspector license, primarily because, and maybe Mr. Maples can help me out, but in order to apply for the building inspector position, you have to have a sponsorship from a community, similar to when we hired Mr. Maples for him to get the building official position. But he has the qualifications and education to be able to apply for with our sponsorship and test for the building inspector position. Is that a fair summary?
Yes, it is.
Okay. He interviewed well, came with several recommendations. I'll remind the board that ultimately this position comes with it a rather lengthy probationary period, 90 working days, which works out to be just about 5 months of employment before he's actually, officially off probation and a regular employee of the township. So it is the recommendation of the supervisor's office that we hire Mr. Brent Condon for the position of building inspector in the building department with a starting salary as established in the ASME contract, plus benefits subject to a physical, drug test, and 90-day probationary period.
It wouldn't be building inspector.
It would ultimately, correct. We'd be hiring him for that position, but ultimately, the pay that he would receive would be the ordinance officer position. But we recognize that upon qualification, in other words, a fellow goes to Lansing, takes the test, he passes the test, he's being hired as a building inspector and not ordinance officer, although we recognize his primary role will be ordinance officer. Until he does that, the salary schedule would be the ordinance officer position.
Now, if I remember correctly, Steve is going to be the building inspector, is that correct?
Steve has applied for the building inspector's position, yes.
Well, he actually already
Okay.
holds the building inspector position.
Right.
And we don't have an ordinance position right now.
Right
So
now,
this-
he's, yeah,
so
wearing two
this
hats.
is ordinance,
This,
correct?
yeah, this gentleman's duties would be ordinance, but, again, same situation, we want him qualified to be able to do building inspection so that 2 employees can sort of work together and cross-train. But primarily, his responsibility would be ordinance, whereas Mr. Sternicki's would then primarily be building inspector.
I have two concerns with this particular issue, and I was having a little bit of a medical problem there. But that being said, we only interviewed one person for the job. I have a real concern about that. Out of 15 applicants, and we only interview one person for the job, and I'll just leave that as it is. But more importantly, the previous person that held this position, or the building inspector's position, we've recently found out, has been accepted to go to arbitration. So there is a concern that if we lose that arbitration, and I don't know, it's 50-50, I would say at best, whether we win or lose that arbitration, that employee might come back slot into that building inspector's position. We'd have, if the arbitrator ruled, we'd have to bring that terminated employee back and bring them into that position. That's a concern. I don't know if we've received anything and when that arbitration is gonna proceed or not. If it's during the honeymoon period, I guess, or the probationary period, I guess we're okay. But I mean, if the individual does get accepted tonight, I think he needs to know that there is a possibility that he might get laid off or, you know, we'd have to let him go. I don't see us holding 3 building inspector positions, but, you know, that's for the board to decide when it comes up, but, you know, we've had an ordinance officer and 1 building inspector for several years now. I don't know that we need 3, but I think he needs to be well aware that if we lose that arbitration, we might be let go.
Okay. Are there any other comments, or is there a motion this evening? Is there a motion this evening?
I'll make a motion to approve to hire Brent Condon for the position of code enforcement officer to be moved into building inspector after attainment of his license in the building department with a starting salary as established in the ASME contract plus benefits, subject to physical drug test and 90-day probationary period.
All right, we've got a motion by Mr. Witt. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Mr. Capel. Further discussion, board? Hearing none, we'll open the floor for public comment.
Bill Servio, longtime resident. I happen to know this young man, at least he was a young man when I knew him. I haven't seen him in a number of years. I knew his mother, father, and brother. And he seemed to be a well-liked kid at the time. So I have no problem with him. But in fairness to him, being what Mr. York just brought up, in fairness to him, he has a good paying job right now, a secure job. He has his motivations for wanting to come here. It's none of my business why he wants to, but maybe you should table this for a little while. You have Denny, I was just told today by Joe that Denny is still licensed until May of next year. I assume he's willing to work as needed until then. So, you know, there's not an immediate need. I know there's a long-term need, but if our previous building/ordinance officer does win arbitration and gets her job back, then you're gonna have to lay this guy off, and that's not fair to him. You know, but on the other hand, if you offer him the job now, he's probably gonna take it and gamble that somebody doesn't get their position back. The fair thing would be for you to table it for a while, see where arbitration goes. I have no problem with you hiring him, but without being redundant, that's what I think you should do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Supervisor,
Well,
I
hold
think,
on a second, I'm sorry. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment.
sorry.
Yep, that's okay.
I guess I would agree with Mr. York that we should at least advise the applicant that this condition exists and let him make his own decision.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yep.
So I would be comfortable, I agree with the comments made and with Mr. York, but as long as this individual is aware, I think that's the best we can do.
Okay. All right, any other comments? Hearing none, we have a, oh, sorry.
Just, you know, our goal is that he obtains his license, and I have no reason to think he doesn't, but I think it should go without saying that at the end of the probationary period, if he doesn't have his license, I mean, we'd have to look at where he is in that process to say, I mean, our ultimate goal is to have a building inspector and.
Well, I think realistically, or maybe stated another way, a lot of the day-to-day operational issues relative, say, for example, that probationary period, really falls on the 3 full-timers. If at the end of this roughly 5-month period, if we feel that that his performance or his efforts in attaining his license are deficient, the time to take that action is then. But I think it would ultimately be for this board to say, you know, or the 3 full-timers to recommend to the board, I suppose, that we don't allow him to become, to finish his probation.
Right.
But I think that really falls on us on a daily.
Yeah, I just want to
monitoring.
make sure that we mention it, at least
Sure.
talk about it, so we know that that would be an issue going forward.
Yep, any other discussion?
I would just like to say one thing regarding the state certification. Basically, he has to have 4 years' work experience out of the last 12. I mean, he's got that portion of it. The rest of that, basically, he also has, I believe, an associate's degree, which would, give him more credibility in construction management. And I think just passing the test would probably be pretty easy for him. So I don't think that should really be a concern at this point. I wouldn't have, agreed to, support him if I had any doubts of him not being able to pass the state test. So I think there's good reason.
Pretty high probability.
Yes.
Yep.
I wouldn't have made the motion if I didn't have the same belief that he
Right.
could qualify,
Yeah.
but
Yeah, we just want to make sure that we're clear and in an open forum that certainly that's a condition. At this point, we believe we're hiring ultimately for a building inspector. So it's kind of a conditional situation. We're fully expecting him to apply, and I have no reason to think otherwise, but we're clearly stating as a public body in an open meeting that, it would be, potentially could have an impact on his employment.
Who's doing the ordinance? Is this gentleman doing the ordinance, or is Steve
Yes.
gonna be doing the ordinance?
This gentleman would be primarily responsible for ordinance enforcement. Any other discussion? Hearing none, we have a motion by Mr. Witt with support by Mr. Caprell to hire Mr. Brent Condon for the position of ordinance enforcement and ultimately building inspector upon completion of the state requirements in the building department, with starting salary as established in the ASME contract, plus benefits subject to a physical, drug test, and 90-day probationary period. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Next on the agenda is item G, public comments. I'll advise members of the public, this is the time when they have 5 minutes to speak, address the board about anything they wish to in the public comment section.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, you want my name and address?
Well, you could mention it again if you don't mind.
I addressed Andrew, the deputy supervisor, about my plight. I mean, we were having outages one after another in this community.
Electric?
And next door, the guy's got trees all over the damn place. I cut all my trees down, not because somebody forced me to, but because I thought it was the right thing to do, because when I moved in the house, it was shade all over the place. And then I kept looking at them trees growing every year, and finally, the last 3 cost me $5,000 to cut down. Well, just recently, last couple of days, we had power outage again. I mean, we're having power outage in this community, and you people are all sitting on your fat ass, I mean, and letting these trees grow. I mean, they grow by themselves. They don't shrink. They grow and they get brittle. And the next door to me, there's a tree that's a double tree, and it's hanging over my fence line, and it's gonna wipe my wires out. It didn't wipe out this storm, because this storm just barely hit us. But there's houses all over this place, and there's millions of dollars that's gonna be spent, or has to be spent, in order, Harrison Township ain't gonna be here too much longer, because nobody's doing anything about these trees growing. The guy on the other side of me, he's got trees hanging over the wires on the main trunk line, or whatever you wanna call it, and a bunch of them fell into the neighbor's yard on the other side of the wires. I mean, what are we doing about it? And I can't, and what bothers me is I plan to live here till I kick the bucket, but Jesus Pete, I mean, every couple of weeks, power outage, and it's not for 1 day or 1 hour or 2 hours, it's 4 or 5 days. Now, this one, it lasted, 3 days, 4 days? I mean, how the hell do you cope with this situation? I mean, I'm not getting any younger, and neither are you. I mean, so what the hell are we doing? I mean, we're just sitting here. I talked to this Andrew, and I might as well talk to the wall. And apparently I might be receiving the same situation here. So what do we do? I mean, I can't live in this situation. If I go to Florida for a couple of months, I mean, and we have a storm out, my whole house is destroyed. I mean, because the power's out and pipes are froze and everything else. I mean, and I just went through what do you call it, redone my house. I spent a lot of money on my house. I mean, I had to put in a new sewer line, I had to put in, and I put in new cabinets and the whole damn thing. I mean, And I was planning on, you know, as long as I'm physically able to handle situations, I was planning on staying there. But I can't stay there with the damn power out every time I turn around. I mean, Jesus, Pete, I mean, you know, I put a water siphon in, I put every damn thing imaginable, but I'm not going to put one of them $11,000 generators in because I don't think it's my part to do it. I mean, because some jackass doesn't cut his trees. I mean, this particular tree is going to wipe my wires right off of my house. So anyway, you people plan on doing anything? I mean, you're going to be faced with this because, you know, I'm going to get my wires wiped out in the next half-ass storm. This last storm was 375,000 people lost power, right? And I'm lucky they turned the power on today. And because we're the last ones on the totem pole. I spent 5 days in a hospital not too long ago because the wind was blowing the right direction by the, blew the carbon monoxide in the house, and I spent 5 days in a hospital because of it. Because, you know, it's colorless, odorless, and it just flooded my house. It took 5 days for the damn carbon monoxide to get out. And they were going to put me in a pressurized chamber downtown to get the carbon monoxide out of my bloodstream, but finally my blood evacuated carbon monoxide. So, I mean, what I'm looking for is, you know, some action now. I mean, there's a tree. You can come over and take a look at the damn thing, and it's huge. It's maybe 30 feet in distance with these big, ugly limbs hanging over my fence, ready to wipe my wires out. I mean, what the hell do I do? I mean, do I sell the stupid house and because I'm going to take a bath on it as soon as they find out about it. I mean, I can't get it. The house is in excellent shape, and but I sure hell can't every 2 weeks be faced with power outage, power outage, power outage. And Edison takes care of Detroit, and it's not their fault. These trees are not Edison's fault. These are individuals. I mean, mine's the only yard that's got no trees that are dangerous to the power lines. But this tree is dangerous to my power line, to my house, and he makes no effort. I mean, it wasn't too long ago where we had a freak storm and all the branches from his limbs, all the small stuff, filled my yard up. Do you think he came over and helped me, you know, to throw him over the fence? I mean, they were his limbs. And no, on my porch, on my roof, I mean, Jesus beat everywhere. So anyway, that's my plea, and I hope somebody takes action. Andrew might as well talk to the wall, and I hope I'm not talking to a wall here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Bill Servil, resident. I just wanted to make 2 comments. First off, the fact of the matter is that when somebody has to run for an elected position, which I've done 2 times, it's a lot of work. You have to be more dedicated to want that job harder than if you just put an application in for an appointment. So you're going to get a better quality of dedicated people if you have elected officials on that board. And the sooner you can do that, the better. The second point is, if in fact Mr. York is correct and Brent Condon was the only applicant that you actually interviewed, so you have no second backup candidate. If that's correct, I would hope that you tell the man that if he has apprehension about it, that you're not going to fill that position immediately if he waffles on it. I hate to see him not take the job because he's worried about it if he's the true candidate you want. There's really no immediate rush. You've had Denny, and yet ordinance isn't getting done. You've got 2 building inspectors right now, and ordinance isn't getting done. I don't know why. I don't run that department, but I know that people have been coming to me. You know, I'm a fixture around here. People talk to me, and they complain. I just heard from someone yesterday that nothing's being done. So, you know, ordinance isn't happening now when you do have the ability to do that. Denny, I assume with the amount of work that's coming in for inspections, they should be able to handle that and ordinance too at this point in time. When we had only 2 people serving in that capacity when things were booming here. So going back to the new hire, I would hope that you do the right thing by this young man. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment, we'll close the floor for public comment and move back to board comment. Is there any board comments?
Mr. Chairman, just wanted to make a comment about a SEMCOG university class that's being held on October 1st. It's a free class that's entitled Connecting Businesses to Financial and Other Resources. It's a morning session which indicates that it is for municipal administrators, economic developers, planners, and those involved in the DDA capacity, the Downtown Development Authority. Just seemed like it was a timely seminar which somebody might want to take advantage of. It's at no cost because we are members, and I sent something out to the board in that regard, and I wanted to bring that up this evening, October 1st.
Yep, it seemed like it may be very appropriate. Of course, September 17th, we're having a workshop regarding establishment of a DDA, and actually I probably should have had in the announcements. At this point, I believe September 29th is when we'll be conducting the public hearing, I believe it was, on the redevelopment plan.
It seemed like a timely seminar for what's coming up in the township.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. Mr. Huth, I'm not aware of any ordinance that we have that gives us the authority to trim or force someone to trim their trees. Are you aware of any ordinance or authority that the township possesses whereby we can require people to trim trees?
Well, there was a fact there that I heard tonight, I didn't remember hearing before. He's able to trim trees that are coming into his yard, and
Correct.
I thought he said they're hanging over my fence into
Right.
my yard.
Right.
I think his house, when he had came a couple meetings ago, he has a midline span that comes from the power line that comes through his neighbor's yard and to his house. So there's a difficulty there. And I know Andrew had been working with our ordinance officer as far as whether or not, to look at whether or not it was a public nuisance. And I don't know if he's reached to your office for some guidance yet.
But I think where you were going was if someone has branches from their tree that extend into your yard, you have every right to trim them.
That's true.
Right.
But from now that I hear Mr. Witt's rendition of what's going on there, that's not going to solve it.
Right.
And it's a high standard to be a public nuisance, so.
It's difficult to say that we require that you must trim your tree.
Right, it's hard to
Isn't
legislate
there
being a
something
good
with
neighbor.
DTE and the electricity that you have to trim around the lines?
DT only addresses the lines that are
Primary lines.
are transmission lines, the main
Right.
lines, not
Local
the feed
drops.
to your house.
But if your neighbor, there has to be something that your neighbor can't be around your wires to, I can't imagine that there's not something.
Because it is a local, in other words, excuse me, we'll
Well,
say,
then let's do an ordinance.
we'll say a transmission line that addresses a neighborhood is a public